A millionaire met a homeless woman in the most unlikely place, and what happened next changed both their lives forever. This isn't just a story about wealth and struggle. It's about second chances, breaking barriers, and discovering that love can grow in even the harshest of circumstances. Before we begin, comment below and tell us where you're watching from, because this is one love story you'll never forget. The rain was coming down in sharp, cold needles, the kind that made New York City's streets shine like black glass. Ethan Cross had his driver pull over by the curb outside a high-rise hotel, a phone pressed to his ear, voice clipped as he ended yet another deal in a week full of them. He was 34, CEO of Cross Enterprises, the kind of man whose suit alone costs more than most people's yearly rent. Every step he took was purposeful, his polished shoes avoiding puddles like they were beneath him. That's when he saw her. She was huddled under a thin blanket beside the entrance to a subway station, her back pressed against the concrete wall. Rain dripped from the ends of her tangled hair, and her clothes were layered but still too thin for the biting wind. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup, not the kind for coffee, but the kind you held out to strangers in hope. Her eyes met his for the briefest second, and something in them, sharp, alive, and impossibly defiant, made him pause. "Sir, we should go inside," his driver murmured, holding the umbrella higher. Ethan didn't answer right away. For reasons he couldn't explain, his feet had rooted themselves to the wet sidewalk. The woman looked away first, pulling the blanket tighter as though bracing against an invisible blow. He stepped past her, telling himself it was just another face in a city full of them. But even as he entered the warm, gold-lit lobby, the image of her lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. Hours later, he was seated in the hotel's private lounge, nursing a drink and listening half-heartedly to the chatter of other wealthy guests. Deals were discussed, fortunes measured, and reputations sharpened like knives. But every time laughter rang out, his mind flicked back to the woman outside in the rain. Who was she? Why did she look at him like that, without pleading, without fear, almost like she dared him to see her? The next morning, Ethan found himself walking past the same subway entrance. The rain had stopped, replaced by a brittle winter sun. She was still there. This time she was sketching in a battered notebook, the lines fast and sure despite her numb fingers. "What are you drawing?" he asked before he could stop himself. She looked up, startled, then narrowed her eyes. "Why, you gonna buy it?" Her voice was raspy but steady, carrying a hint of dry humor that didn't match her situation. "Maybe," he said. She hesitated, then turned the notebook so he could see. It was a sketch of the very street they were on, the skyscrapers bending toward the sky, the puddles catching fragments of light. It was good, more than good. It was the city as it felt, not just as it looked. "You sell these?" he asked. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Not many art collectors shopping on subway steps. Something tightened in his chest. He didn't know her name, her story, or why fate had placed her here, but he wanted to, and that want was unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. "Come with me," he said suddenly. Her eyes narrowed again. "Right, let me just grab my mansion keys." He almost smiled. "Almost, I'm serious, my treat." For a long moment she studied him, as if weighing the risk. Then, with a shrug, she stood, tucking the notebook into a worn backpack. "Fine, but if you're a creep, I'm gone." They walked side by side toward a small cafe, an unlikely pair drawing curious glances from passers-by. Inside, warmth and the smell of fresh coffee wrapped around them. She ordered with the hunger of someone who hadn't had a full meal in days, but without embarrassment. "I'm Ethan," he offered. "Lila," she replied shortly. He repeated, as though testing the name on his tongue. As they talked about art, about the city, about nothing and everything, he began to realize something dangerous. This wasn't pity. This was intrigue, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something he couldn't control. But neither of them knew that the simple act of sharing breakfast would set in motion a chain of events that would shake both their worlds to the core. The cafe's windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside, blurring the rush of people hurrying along the street. Ethan watched Lila eat with quiet focus, noting how she seemed to savor every bite like it was a rare luxury. She wasn't shy about it either, no pretense, no awkward glances to see if anyone was judging. She was unapologetically present in the moment, and for reasons he couldn't quite name, it made him uneasy. "So," she said between sips of coffee, "what's your deal, Mr. Expensive Suit?" He raised a brow. "My deal? Yeah, guys. Like you don't just stop and chat with people like me unless it's for a social media stunt." The corner of his mouth tugged upward. "I'm not in the habit of filming my breakfast conversations." "Good to know." She pushed her empty plate away and leaned back. "Then what? You bored, curious, or just looking for a way to feel better about yourself?" He should have been offended, but instead he found himself impressed by her bluntness. No one in his world spoke to him like that. "Maybe I'm just interested in your art," he said smoothly. Her eyes searched his face, as if she were trying to figure out whether to believe him. Interested enough to buy one. Interested enough to commission one. That made her pause. "Commission?" "Yes, I want you to paint something for me." Her expression shifted from suspicion to something closer to curiosity. "And why would I do that?" Because I'll pay you more than you've probably been offered for any drawing. She studied him for another long moment, then gave a little snort. Sounds like you're used to people saying yes to you. They usually do, he admitted. Well, I'm not most people. She stood slinging her bag over her shoulder. Thanks for breakfast, Ethan, but I'm not in the business of becoming anyone's charity project. Before he could respond, she was out the door, disappearing into the cold glare of the winter morning. Ethan sat there for a moment, the echo of her words settling over him. In his world, walking away from his offer was unthinkable. But she had done it without hesitation. And somehow, that only made him more determined. Over the next few days, he found himself changing his routines, detouring his morning walks so they passed the same subway entrance. Sometimes she was there, sketching. Other times she was gone. When she was there, he would catch her glance in his direction before quickly looking away, her pencil never pausing. On the fourth morning, he found her crouched on the sidewalk, surrounded by a small group of people admiring her work. She was sketching an elderly man's portrait, and the resemblance was uncanny. The lines captured not just the shape of his face but the weight of his years. You're talented, Ethan said when the crowd began to disperse. Still not for sale, she replied without looking up. I'm not asking for charity, he said firmly. I'm asking for work. Your work, on your terms. This time she looked at him, really looked, as if searching for the catch. My terms, yes. A beat passed before she said, I want half up front. And I don't work from photos, I paint from life. Done. She blinked, clearly not expecting such a quick agreement. Fine, meet me tomorrow at the east entrance of Central Park. Bring whatever you want, painted, and the cash. Ethan nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his chest. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just about a painting anymore. It was about seeing what made her tick. The next morning, the air was crisp, the park paths dusted with frost. Lila was already there, bundled in layers, her notebook and pencils ready. She looked at him once, then at the city skyline beyond. Sit, she said simply, pointing to a bench. As she began to sketch, Ethan watched her hands move with quiet precision. Every stroke seemed deliberate, her focus absolute. And as the minutes passed, he realized he was telling her things not about himself directly, but in the way he held his posture, the way he met her gaze when she glanced up. Why art? He asked quietly. Because it's the only thing I can't lose, she replied, not missing a beat. For the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't have a ready response. And as her pencil moved, something invisible began to shift between them. The air around them was sharp with the scent of frost and damp earth. The faint hum of the city softened by the hush of Central Park. Lila's focus never wavered, her gaze darting between him and the sketchpad in her lap. Ethan felt oddly exposed, under her scrutiny, not in the way he did when corporate rivals or the press studied him, but in a way that felt personal. You're not used to sitting still, are you? She asked without looking up. He gave a dry chuckle. You can tell you keep shifting your weight, your jaw's tight. You look like you're waiting for someone to hand you a report to sign. The accuracy of her observation caught him off guard. Maybe I'm just not used to being someone's subject. Then maybe you should try being one more often. You might learn something. It was the kind of remark that would have irritated him coming from anyone else. But from her, it felt less like an insult and more like a dare. After about an hour, she finally leaned back and studied the sketch. It's not finished, but it's enough for today. He glanced at the paper and was startled by what he saw, not just his face, but a version of himself stripped of the guarded expression he usually wore. His eyes looked almost human. You've got a good eye, he admitted. She shrugged, closing the sketchpad. I just draw what's there. Most people don't like it. I do. Her mouth twitched, as if she might smile, but she stood before it could form. Same time tomorrow, Ethan nodded. Same time. Over the next week, the park sessions became a quiet ritual. They spoke in fragments about art, about the city, about the little details most people overlooked. He learned she'd been living on the streets for nearly 2 years, drifting between shelters and hidden corners, always keeping her sketchpad safe. She learned he ran one of the largest real estate firms in the city, a fact she met with a raised eyebrow and a muttered, figures. One morning, as snowflakes began to fall, she didn't show up. Ethan waited an hour, scanning every path, but she was nowhere in sight. That uneasy feeling from the first time he saw her returned, heavier this time. By the next day he was walking the streets, checking the subway entrance, the shelter near Lexington, even the alley behind the cafe they'd visited. Finally he spotted her on a bench outside a closed bookstore, hunched under her blanket. Lila, she looked up, her face pale and her eyes tired. Hey Ethan, you missed our session. Yeah, guess I wasn't in the mood to be immortalized yesterday. He sat beside her, ignoring the cold seeping through his coat. What happened? Nothing. New cops cleared out the spot I was sleeping in. Lost my blanket, half my stuff. She said it flatly, like it was just another Tuesday. Something in his chest tightened. You can't keep living like this. She gave a hollow laugh. Thanks for the breaking news. I mean it, Lila. I could know. Her voice was sharp enough to cut him off. Don't offer me a penthouse or a guest room or whatever it is you think I need. I've had people try to save me before, and it always comes with strings. This isn't about strings, it's about you not freezing to death. Same difference. She stood, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. I'll see you in the park when the snow stops. He watched her walk away, frustration burning under his skin. She was stubborn, infuriatingly sobered. There was a strength in that stubbornness that he couldn't help admiring. The next day, she was back in the park, sketchpad in hand, acting as though nothing had happened. But Ethan noticed her fingers trembled more than usual, and she coughed twice before they even started. You're sick, he said. I'm fine. You're not fine. Then maybe you can commission a drawing of me coughing. She shot back with a faint smirk. Against his better judgment, he laughed. And in that moment, with snow dusting her hair and defiance in her eyes, he realized he was already too far gone to walk away. What he didn't realize was that someone else had started noticing their meetings and not everyone approved. The shadow of disapproval didn't come in whispers, it arrived in the form of Veronica Hale, Ethan's longtime business associate, an occasional date for corporate galas. She cornered him in his glass-walled office one afternoon, heels clicking sharply against the marble. I hear you've been spending time in the park, she began, her tone light but laced with steel. Ethan didn't look up from the contract. He was reviewing I take walks. Is that headline news now? Depends on who you're walking with. She leaned against his desk. Word is, you've been seen with some street artist. His gaze lifted slowly, and that's not exactly a good look for the CEO of Cross Enterprises. You have investors, Ethan, a reputation. This woman isn't part of that picture. Something cold settled in his voice. My personal life isn't for the board to manage. Veronica's eyes narrowed, but she smoothed her expression into a smile. Just be careful. The higher you climb, the more people want to see you fall. After she left, Ethan stared out at the city skyline, his reflection ghosted in the glass. Veronica's warning was calculated, but it didn't change anything. If anything, it only made him more determined to see Lila again. That afternoon, he headed to the park. Lila was already there, her hair tucked into a knitted beanie that had clearly seen better days. She looked up and gave a small nod. You're late, she said, got held up. He sat down, watching her pencil move across the page. How are you feeling? Better than yesterday. Worse than the day before, he smirked. That clears things up. She glanced at him, her eyes catching on the slight crease between his brows. You look like you've got something on your mind. Veronica Hale, should I know who that is? No, and that's probably for the best. Lila set her pencil down, curiosity flickering across her face. She a girlfriend? Not exactly. Then why'd she put that look on your face? She thinks you're bad for my image, he said plainly. Her expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders stiffened. She's right, he frowned. That's not what I meant. It's fine, Ethan. You don't have to defend me. I know what people see when they look at me. She picked up her pencil again, her voice steady. You live in a world where everything's polished and perfect. I don't fit there. Maybe I'm tired of polished and perfect. She didn't respond, just kept sketching, but her hand faltered for a fraction of a second. When the session ended, she handed him the latest work in progress. The drawing wasn't of him this time, it was of the park bench they always sat on, framed by bare winter trees, a faint outline of two figures just beginning to take shape. Consider it a bonus, she said. Packing her things, he watched her walk away, wondering if she realized the bench looked like it was meant for them over the next few days. Their meetings continued. There were moments of easy banter, moments of silence, and moments where the city around them seemed to blur into nothing. Ethan started noticing the way her eyes softened when she laughed, the way she tilted her head when she was deep in thought. Lila in turn began asking questions about his life, not about the money, but about the choices that had shaped him. Then came the day the snow turned into freezing rain. Ethan arrived at the park early, umbrella in hand, only to find Lila sitting under the bare branches, sketchpad open, raindrops smudging the page. You're going to ruin that drawing, he said. Maybe I like the way the rain changes it. Come on, you'll freeze. She looked at him for a long moment before finally letting him lead her out of the park. He brought her to a small, quiet restaurant tucked between two brown. The staff didn't bat an eye at her damp clothes, hasn't had that kind of pull over steaming bowls of soup. She studied him with an intensity that made him want to shift in his seat. Why do you keep showing up, Ethan? You could hire any artist you want. Hell, you could buy a gallery. Maybe I'm not just after a painting, he said softly. Something flickered in her expression, fear maybe, or hope, but before she could answer, a man in a dark coat walked past their table, giving Ethan a pointed look. Ethan recognized him instantly. Peter Lang, a reporter who thrived on corporate gossip, and in that moment, Ethan knew the story of their breakfasts and park benches might not stay theirs for much longer. Peter Lang didn't speak, but the glance was enough. Ethan had seen that look before, the quiet spark of recognition followed by the mental click of a story falling into place. Lila noticed. Friend of yours? Not exactly, Ethan said, watching the door close behind Peter. He's a journalist, the kind who doesn't care if the truth gets in the way of a headline. Her brow furrowed. Should I be worried? No, he said quickly. Then, after a beat, maybe, she rolled her eyes. Comforting. The rest of the meal passed in an uneasy quiet. When they stepped outside, the rain had turned into a fine mist that coated the pavement in silver. Ethan offered to walk her back to her spot near the subway entrance, but she shook her head. "I'll find my way. Besides, I'm pretty sure your friends wouldn't approve of you being seen with me twice in one day." He wanted to argue, but she was already walking away, shoulders squared, each step deliberate. That night, his phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. "Saw Lang at the Rookery tonight. Be careful." It was followed by a link to a gossip blog known for running speculative pieces. The headline read, "Billionaire's Mysterious Park Companion, a Love Story or a PR Disaster." The article had no names, just a grainy photo taken from across the park, a blurred image of him on the bench, sketchpad in her lap. The comments section was already filling with guesses and judgments. Ethan closed the tab, jaw tight. The next morning he went to the park early, but Lila wasn't there. He waited nearly an hour scanning every path, but the bench stayed empty. Finally, he set out toward the places he'd found her before until he spotted her outside the bookstore again. Who'd pulled Lo's sketchpad open. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said without looking up. "Yes, and now you're here too. What? Apologize. Tell me we shouldn't see each other anymore. Or maybe offer me hush money to disappear quietly." Her words were sharp, but her hands kept moving across the page. "I'm here because I wanted to see you," he said evenly. "And because I don't care what some blog says." She finally looked at him, eyes narrowed. "You might not care now, but your world does, and your world is a lot louder than mine." He crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Then let them talk. I'm not walking away." Something in her expression softened for just a heartbeat, but then she snapped the sketchbook shut. "You don't get it, Ethan. You're choosing to step into this mess. I was born in it. Then maybe I want to understand it," he said. They stared at each other, the city's noise filling the space between them. Finally, she sighed and stood. "Come on, if we're going to get hounded by the press, you might as well see where I live." He followed her through a maze of side streets and alleys until they reached a hidden courtyard behind a boarded-up building. In one corner, tucked beneath a rusted fire escape, was a makeshift shelter, just a tarp, a pile of blankets, and a battered duffel bag. "This is it," she said simply. Home. Ethan took it in silently. The cold was sharper here, the wind funneled between the brick walls. "You survive like this every night?" he asked quietly. "Not every night. Some nights I get a cot in a shelter, but those fill up fast." He felt the weight of her reality settle in his chest. "Lila, don't," she interrupted. "Don't make promises you can't keep." They stood there for a long moment before a sudden shout echoed from the alley. A man stumbled in, eyes glassy, muttering under his breath. Lila stiffened instantly. "We should go," she said quickly, grabbing her bag. Now, Ethan followed her out, but the image of her home stayed burned in his mind. Later that night, he sat in his penthouse staring at the skyline. For the first time, the glass and steel felt less like achievement and more like a wall keeping him apart from something-someone-real. And in the quiet, he made a decision. He wasn't just going to understand her world. He was going to change it. What he didn't know was that someone else had plans to change it first, and not for the better. The first sign of trouble came 2 days later, when Lila didn't show up to the park or any of her usual spots. Ethan searched the city in widening circle subway stations, alleyways, shelters, but there was no sign of her. Each passing hour made the unease in his chest grow heavier. By late afternoon, he was in his office pacing by the floor-to-ceiling windows when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. "You're looking for your little artist friend," a man's voice said, smooth but with a bite underneath. Ethan froze. "Who is this?" "Let's just say I'm someone who's been keeping an eye on her. She owes some people money, people who don't like being ignored." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "What do you want?" 20 grand. Cash. Drop it off at Pier 17 tomorrow night, and maybe she walks away." The line went dead. Ethan stood there, the city lights beginning to flicker on below. 20,000 was nothing to him, but the fact that someone had Lila, or at least knew where she was, made his blood run cold. The next evening, he went to the pier as instructed, a plain duffel bag in hand. The air smelled of salt and diesel, fog curling over the dark water. 2 men stepped out from behind a shipping container, one tall and thin, the other broad with a shaved head. "You crossed?" the broad one asked. "I am. Where is she?" "Money first." Ethan tossed the duffel to them. The thin one unzipped it, counting quickly before giving a nod. "She's over there," he said, jerking his head toward the shadows. Lila stepped forward, her face pale, eyes flicking to Ethan with a mixture of surprise and something unreadable. "You paid them?" she asked, once they were alone. "I paid them to let you go," he corrected. "I didn't ask you to." He ran a hand through his hair, trying to keep his voice level. "Lila, they could have hurt you. They weren't going to kill me," she said flatly. "They just wanted to scare me into paying up." "That's not exactly reassuring." She crossed her arms, shivering in the damp air. "This is my life, Ethan. You can't just throw money at it until it looks like yours." He stepped closer. "Maybe I'm not trying to make it look like mine. Maybe I'm trying to make sure you still have one." Her eyes softened just a fraction, but she shook her head. "You don't understand. Every time someone swoops in to fix things for me, it ends up costing me more in the long run. People like me don't get rescued, we get traded. Then let me be the exception." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fog swirled around them, muffling the distant horns of ships. Finally, she sighed. "I need some time." He wanted to argue, to tell her time wasn't something she could afford, not with people like that in her orbit. But he bit back the words, "All right, time." They walked away from the pier together, their footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. But halfway down the block, she stopped. "This is where I leave you," she said. "Lila," she gave him a faint, almost sad smile. "You're a good man, Ethan, but you're not from my world. And my world, it's not a place you can visit without getting lost." She turned and disappeared into the night, leaving him standing in the cold, the smell of salt still clinging. To the air dot back in his penthouse, Ethan poured a drink and stared out at the skyline, replaying every word she'd said. He told himself he'd give her the time she asked for, but deep down he knew he wasn't done. And neither, apparently, was Peter Lang, because the next morning, a new headline blazed across the city's gossip feeds. "Billionaire caught in midnight. Ransom scandal, mystery woman at the center." The headline spread like wildfire, bouncing from gossip blogs to mainstream media within hours. By mid-morning, Ethan's assistant was fielding frantic calls from investors, board members, and inevitably "Veronica, you're trending," she said when he picked up, her voice sharp as glass. "And not in a way that's going to make the quarterly report look better." "I don't care about the report right now." "Well, you should," she snapped, "because the board cares, and if you don't handle this, they'll handle it for you. That means you step down until the scandal blows over." Ethan didn't answer. His mind was on Lila, not the headlines, not the investors, but the fact that she might be reading every vicious comment attached to her blurred photo online. By noon, he was back on the streets, scanning every familiar corner. It was past dusk when he finally found her in a quiet pocket of the East Village, sitting on the stoop of a shuttered shop. Her sketchpad was in her lap, but she wasn't drawing, just staring at the blank page. "Lila," he said softly. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Congratulations, you're famous." "I'm not the one they're after." Her mouth twisted. "You think I don't know how this works? They're going to pick apart my life, Ethan. They'll find every mistake I've ever made, every person I've ever disappointed, and they'll turn it into entertainment." "I can make it stop," he said. She shook her head. "No, you can't. You can only make it worse." "Lila," she stood abruptly. "I told you before, your world and mine don't mix. And now look." She gestured toward the glow of a nearby screen in a shop window where the headline scrolled beneath a stock image of Ethan. "This is exactly why I keep my distance. You think distance will protect you? They've already got your picture." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. "Then I'll disappear." Something in his chest clenched. "You think I'd just let that happen? Ethan, you have an empire to run. I have this." She motioned to the small bag at her feet. "You'll be fine without me. You were fine before you met me." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You think I was fine? I didn't even notice how hollow my life was until you walked into it." Her breath caught, but she looked away. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me want something I can't have." The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Finally, she shouldered her bag. "Go home, Ethan." She walked away without looking back, her figure swallowed by the glow of the streetlights. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't know his next move. Deals, negotiations, those he could win, but this was a fight where the rules didn't apply. Back in his penthouse, he poured himself a drink and stared at his phone, tempted to call her just to hear her voice. Instead, he opened his email to find one from Peter Lang himself. Subject: "We should talk, buddy. I think you want the truth about the people she owes. Meet me tomorrow, noon, Battery Park. Come alone." Ethan sat back, the glass still in his hand. He knew a setup when he saw one. But if there was even a chance Peter had information that could protect Lila, he wasn't going to ignore it. What he didn't realize was that meeting Peter would set in motion the final turn in their story, one that could either destroy them or bring them together for good. Battery Park was cold and bright the next day, the wind off the water cutting through Ethan's coat as he scanned the crowd. Tourists milled about, snapping photos of the skyline, but Peter Lang was easy to spot, lean, smug, and holding a coffee cup like it was a prop. "You came," Peter said, strolling toward him. "You said you had information," Ethan replied, his tone clipped. Peter smirked. "I do, but I don't give it away for free." Ethan folded his arms. "You're a journalist. Isn't truth supposed to be your currency?" Peter chuckled. "Truth is a product, Ethan. And this particular truth, it sells for access. You give me exclusive rights to your next development project, inside details. Early leaks, and I give you what I know about Lila's debt." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're blackmailing me. Call it in exchange." For a moment, Ethan considered walking away. But if there was a chance this could keep Lila safe, fine, tell me. Peter leaned in. "The men at the pier, small-time collectors, but they're working for someone bigger. Marcus Keene. He runs half the illegal porn operations in the East Side. Lila's name came up because of a friend of hers who disappeared last year. The debt isn't really hers, but Keene thinks she's the easiest one to squeeze." Ethan absorbed the information, his mind already calculating the angles. Where do I find him? Peter grinned. Now that, my friend, will cost you extra. Ethan walked away without another word, the pieces clicking into place. He didn't care about Peter's games, he cared about ending this for good. That night, he found Keen's operation. The details didn't matter, only that by the time Ethan walked out, an agreement had been made. The debt was erased. Lila's name was off the list when he found her the next day. She was sketching in the park again, the winter sun turning her breath into small clouds. She looked up, surprised. "You're still here," she said quietly. "I told you I wasn't walking away," he replied. Her eyes searched his. "You fixed it, didn't you? I made sure no one will bother you again." She shook her head slowly, a mixture of disbelief and something softer in her gaze. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Lila, I don't care about the noise or the headlines or the board. I care about you." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then she set her sketchpad aside and stood, the bare branches overhead swaying in the wind. "You're going to regret this," she murmured. "Not a chance." Her mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Then I guess I'm out of excuses." He reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. They stood there, the city moving around them. And for the first time since they met, there was no wall between their worlds, only the quiet understanding that they were choosing each other, no matter what came next. Weeks later, the gossip had died down. The board had stopped calling, and Lila's work hung in the lobby of Cross Enterprises, a painting of the park bench where everything began. On a quiet evening, they returned to that bench. The air was warmer now, the promise of spring in the breeze. "Still think I don't belong in your world?" Ethan asked. She smiled, leaning against him. "I think we built our own." And as the city lights flickered to life around them, they both knew they'd found something rare, not just love, but a second chance neither of them had ever dared to imagine. If you loved Ethan and Lila's journey, rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for more incredible tales of love against all odds. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most unexpected meeting, can change everything.